Good morning. Welcome back. All right, SecNav senators, please have a seat. It's tough when the VIPs are the rowdy ones. All right, I want to welcome everybody back this morning. Again, we had a great night last night. I think the majority of you were here as our opening reception last night on the floor with Senator Reed, and had an opportunity to work the room and meet some new friends, connect with old friends, and keep the conversation going. I had a lot of questions last night about the economic impact study that I mentioned during my introduction. And there were some hard copies here. They've all been consumed last night. It is available on the SENEDIA website, both the entire New England economic impact study and then broken down by each of the New England states. So feel free to go to the SENEDIA website and you can download that economic impact study at your leisure. Again, the numbers are pretty outstanding and worth the time to look at. I'd like to recognize last night also we had representatives from Governor McKee's office here. This morning we're also joined by Mayor of Newport, Mayor Sy, if you want to say hello. So those of you who are from Newport or have businesses in Newport, it's tremendous that we have the support from the municipal, state, federal, the organizational level of support that we get here in Rhode Island and throughout New England is unmatched, which is a kind of a tribute that you feel and see in this room. I'm going to invite Steve Harrison, the Vice President of Government Relations for SAIC, to come up and introduce our first speaker. Steve?
Good morning. It's my honor to introduce the first speaker today, Senator Whitehouse. I would just like to say that I think that a lot of us go to a lot of conferences throughout the year, and I think I'm in agreement with everybody here that this is my personal favorite because of the intimacy and the quality of people that we get. So thank you, SENEDIA, for such a great opportunity again. So I will say that Senator Whitehouse said he'll do 5 to 7 minutes of remarks and then take questions. So have your questions ready to go so that he'll be ready to field them. So Senator Whitehouse is a senator from the state of Rhode Island since 2007. He attended Yale University and then earned a law degree from University of Virginia. He worked as a prosecutor, then as a private practice attorney before entering politics. In addition to his work in the Senate, Senator Whitehouse has served as the Rhode Island State Attorney General and as a U.S. Attorney for the state of Rhode Island. Throughout his career, Senator Whitehouse has been a strong advocate for climate change action, campaign finance reform, and healthcare reform. He is also known as a focus on the judicial system, including his work on criminal judicial reform and his role as the Senate Judiciary Committee. He is the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. Without further ado, Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you and good morning. It's always a delight to be here and to sing the praises of Molly McGee, who does such a wonderful job with SENEDIA. And Timmy DelGiudice, as the chair, has been a friend for a long time, and I want to salute his leadership as well, and join him in recognizing Mayor Sy Kamsavarivong of Newport, who does a terrific job as our new and exciting young mayor. And then I'm thrilled to see Secretary Del Toro here. Every time he comes to Rhode Island, something good is happening. So thank you, Secretary, for being here. We're the Ocean State here, and you are a Navy crowd. So I'm going to talk oceans for a bit, and I'm going to introduce you to the notion of zettajoules. You probably know what mega is from megabytes and terabytes. If you keep going up the mega-tera ladder, you end up at zetta. And the joule, J-O-U-L-E, is the standard unit of measure of heat energy. And a zettajoule has 21 zeros behind it. So it is a really, really, really big number. It is so big a number that the entire consumption of energy by the human species on planet Earth sums to 1/2 of a zettajoule. For the price of the fossil fuel component of that energy use, we are adding into the oceans every single year 14 zettajoules of excess heat. Nearly 30 times humankind's total energy consumption goes into the oceans. And thank goodness, because they take up 90% of the excess heat, and without that, we'd be living already on a pretty uninhabitable planet. So God bless the oceans for doing that. But when that happens, things change. Ask a fisherman, ask a coastal municipality planning for floods and storms, and that all has an effect on our military. The former commanding officer of Naval Station Norfolk has warned that that base only has a couple of decades left. You can lift the piers as far as you like, but it's hard to lift the roads, and it's hard to lift the schools, and it's hard to lift the markets, and it's hard to lift the housing. And so the risk of sea level rise and storm damage acutely affects the readiness of Naval Station Norfolk. The Indo-Pac commander has said that the most dangerous thing that he fears, Admiral Locklear when he was there, is climate-driven disruptions that are very, very significant. And as we see Hurricane Idalia, heated up by the warmest Gulf we've ever experienced, accelerating towards Florida, MacDill Air Force Base is being evacuated as we speak. Obviously not great for readiness at MacDill. So there are facilities problems that emerge from climate change. There are obviously training problems. If you don't believe me, go talk to the emergency management folks in Phoenix, what they've had to do with police and fire responders. Climate is also a huge catalyst of conflict. And a lot of that will have to do with migration. And a lot of it will have to do with battle over resources. My personal biggest worry is India and Pakistan. They don't like each other very much, you might have noticed. They both have nuclear weapons, and they share the watershed of the Himalayas. And if they start fighting over where that water goes, which they have done in their past, with nuclear arms, with people desperately needing water, but with a snowpack and glacier pack in the Himalayas that is evaporating, that's a really dangerous catalyst of conflict between two very dangerous foes. So it gets real in a hurry. And the last thing I'll mention on the risk, and I say this because I grew up in the Foreign Service, and it mattered to me a lot, it mattered to my family a lot, that we represented America around the world in difficult and dangerous places. And we did so with a lot of pride because of the power of America's good example in the world. There's a lot of complaining about our country, but when the chips are down, people want to see America show up. And we show up as an example. As one president said, the power of our example has always mattered more than any example of our power. So the fact that for over a decade now, we've been politically unable to do anything about climate change, and for the worst of all possible reasons, political influence by the industry that is responsible for this, is not a good look. And it's a really bad look as the cost of climate change begins to hit home in third world countries along their coasts where goats used to graze, where crops used to grow. All of those changes hit particularly hard for people who live close to the earth, close to agriculture, close to fisheries. So all of that adds to a pretty toxic mess. What are we going to do about it? There is, I think, a bit of a way out for the next few years. The Inflation Reduction Act was a very good bill. It was estimated by us as we wrote it to be about $370 billion worth of encouragement to move our energy program in that direction. Looks like it's going to be maybe double or even triple that because the take-up has been so enthusiastic, so that's a good thing. And it's being quite well implemented. I want to give John Podesta and Ali Zaida at the White House good marks, TBD, but so far good marks for the job they're doing. Methane is a terrible greenhouse gas, and we have been incredibly sloppy about letting methane leaks go unpoliced and unenforced. But a satellite can now pick up a methane leak. And the Biden administration just announced a multi-agency methane task force to find, fix, and finish the damn methane leaks. And if they're effective at standing that up and getting it going effectively, that can make a very big difference in the US. And once we're not preaching temperance from a bar stool, once we're actually cleaning up our own methane mess, we've got very good position to force a similar type of activity around the world, whether it's the big leaks in Azerbaijan or Algeria or Russia or wherever. We have standing at that point to press to reduce the methane leakage. There's a social cost of carbon, a price on carbon that's filtering up through the EPA Administrative Procedures Act process, and I'm promised that it will go government-wide, which probably also means defense procurement, so ready yourself. But when that goes government-wide, that will send an enormous price signal, in addition to the IRA, about getting ahead of carbon emissions. It is a price on the pollution associated with the product. There's one already happening in the European Union for international trade. It's called the EU CBAM. It's a very cool thing, and we have not yet figured out how we're going to respond to it in the US. I hope that the Biden administration will respond positively with a matching tariff so that we zero out with them and we amplify the signal to the polluting rest of the world, particularly to China, that there actually is a real price for emitting greenhouse gases, and we'll charge them that price. You can talk to them all day long, but when you hit them with a tariff, that gets attention in a whole different way. I'll close by saying that it can't be free to pollute in this world. It's not correct economic behavior. Of all things, the Milton Friedman School of Economics at the University of Chicago just put out a paper saying, yeah, it actually really works badly if you make it free to pollute. That is not proper market theory. It is not proper economic theory, and it's doing immense, immense damage. So if we really want to save ourselves from the pain ahead, we need to put a full-on price on pollution. But until we can pull that off, good enforcement of the IRA, a really robust go-get-em methane task force, a social cost of carbon that applies government-wide, and a robust response to the UCBAM can get us into the zone where a pathway to climate safety is possible. Absent those things, there is not a pathway to climate safety, and that would be a terrible thing to leave to our children and grandchildren. So these are the days in which we need to make it happen, and I want to thank all of you for paying attention to all of this. It will affect your businesses, it will affect your companies, it will affect our national security, it will affect the Navy, and I'm particularly glad to have a chance to share with you these thoughts. Thanks very much. Oh. I was trying to get away before the questions, but Timmy reminded me there's a question or two I should be prepared to take. So have at me. This is Rhode Island. It's like open season. Questions, comments, rude remarks, you name it.
Hi, sir. Thank you. Ed Lopes from Balfour Beatty Communities. Certainly appreciate your comments on Naval Station Norfolk, which incidentally is the largest naval station in the world.
Yep.
Just can't pick up and move it. What are your thoughts on how climate-based decision-making is going to influence the DoD budget, the mission, the planning, and how do you see it in the future, sir?
Well, I think there are a couple of ways. One will have to do with facilities. We have a communications facility on an island in the Indian Ocean that has a good chance of not surviving a significant sea level rise. We have bases like Naval Station Norfolk that are at risk. So the actual location of facilities will be significant. The second will be, when can you use them? When do you need to shut down because it's too hot to train? People can't just operate in that degree of temperature. Or it's so stormy that your operations are compromised by the frequency in which you're shut down basically for weather reasons. I think it's going to affect purchasing and decision-making. It's not yet clear how the DoD is going to take the social cost of carbon once Shalanda Young says, what's your plan? But I suspect it'll fit into a certain amount of procurement. And then, of course, new risks emerge that the DoD has to plan for in terms of what conflicts to look forward to. Where are the worst migrations going to happen? What happens when low-lying countries get flooded and people have to flee into neighboring countries and they're maybe not welcome there? How does all that work out? What does that Admiral Locklear phenomenon look like in practice? Where are the highest risk areas and what do we need to do to prepare for that? So I think those are some of the areas that the DoD is going to be looking at more and more closely as time goes on. Is that a pretty fair summary, Secretary? I'm getting a nod from Del Toro. Good. Secretary.
Sir, as you well know, both yourself here in Rhode Island and us in SENEDIA are committed to the climate conference that you're holding here once a year annually. Could you talk a little bit more to the audience about what your vision is?
Sure. Thank you. As you know, the Naval War College is located here in Newport, and it is a wonderful facility, and we're very, very proud to have it here. The Naval War College is supported by a Naval War College Foundation that helps make things possible that wouldn't otherwise be possible through ordinary bureaucratic channels. And just across town is Salve Regina University, which has the Pell Center for International Studies and has really grown in recent years and has some of the most beautiful geography and facilities anywhere on the planet. If you haven't been to Ochre Court, wow. So there's the prospect, using the credibility and security platform of the Naval War College and the support of its foundation, and Salve Regina and the Pell Center on the policy side more, to join those two together and take the existing structure of lectures at the Naval War College and try to turn that into something that is a little bit more robust and a little bit more lasting. I was a pretty close friend of John McCain. I was the one senator who was a pallbearer for him. And I still go out to the McCain Institute Sedona Forum. And I think the Sedona Forum makes a pretty good model, if any of you have ever been there or want to check it out, for what we could do here. We could have a security forum, which could be climate, could be other things as well, a security forum that takes advantage of the facilities and the policy experience of the Pell Center and the security chops and the location of the Naval War College, and turns it into a truly robust security conference where the decisions can be made that need to drive things forward, and where Senator Reid and I and others can be helpful at trying to get really significant speakers in. I want to thank Secretary Del Toro for kicking off the first joint effort between the two. It's just a brief day of lectures, but you grow, you crawl, then you walk, then you, I hope you'll be running soon with a maybe 2-day full-on security forum here that makes Halifax and Munich jealous. So that's the plan. Thank you for asking. I did not prompt that question, I promise you.
Senator, in your role as the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, a couple of years ago you introduced a bipartisan bill to allow to improve the budgeting process. So do you see any way going forward that would improve either, so we could get away from the kind of the crises, continuing resolutions, government shutdowns, debt limit crises? Do you have any thoughts on how we could improve that process?
Almost anything would improve it. I'm at the point of getting rid of it would be an improvement. But if you wanted to improve it more than just by getting rid of it, you need to change the way that the budget process works. At the moment, the budget process is so stupid that it doesn't even get the arithmetic right. For instance, tax spending does not count in the budget process. For instance, healthcare spending does not count in our budget process. It is focused entirely on appropriated spending, which doesn't get you to the bottom line. And some of the biggest opportunities that we have to correct our fiscal trajectory and get onto a more secure fiscal position are with a fairer tax code, where huge companies and people who make immense amounts of money aren't cheating and paying lower tax rates than regular plumbers and electricians and the folks who are building the boats at Electric Boat. So there's a lot of room there, and then there's a huge amount of room in healthcare savings. You don't have to cut benefits, but you can make it more efficient. We've shown how to do that in Rhode Island. The patients love it. It's actually a win-win-win. So if we could explore those areas, we can get onto a much better budget trajectory, but the present budget setup doesn't do that. It doesn't even have us look at the debt to GDP ratio. And pretty much everybody concedes that some version of the debt to GDP ratio is what the proper test is. You can disagree about what it should be, but that's the metric you should be looking at. We don't look at that. So we get the math wrong and we look at the wrong metric, but other than that, it's a really great process. So I'm trying to fix it. We had a bipartisan thing under Chairman Enzi of Wyoming. It got into the bicameral special commission that was set up. It was passed pretty much unanimously. I think we got every vote out of the bicameral special commission, and then it went both to the House and to the Senate, and nobody took it up. So it died at the end of that Congress. But it's there lurking and waiting to be brought back, and I'm eager to rebuild that team and bring it back, even though we lost Senator Enzi, who was a great ally in all of that.
Senator, you're obviously talking to an audience of industry. What more would you like to see industry do in response to this national security threat? For example, are there additional ways to involve renewable energy, be early adopters and be drivers behind this? And again, we appreciate your comments, and I'll also mention it certainly helps having a spouse that provides the expertise and the background that you're able to use for a lot of your comments.
My wife is a marine scientist and a Navy-trained surface-supported diver back in the day. So she's been watching this for a long time and smacking me smart on it. So that's one of the reasons I pay so much attention, is because I've learned a lot about it from her and from her, professors and colleagues. I think that by and large, industry is doing a pretty good job at improving its own performance. I think the defense industry, because of the nature of how it works, probably lags the rest of industry, but I think people are pushing their way forward, and I think if that social cost of carbon moves into, in some fashion, procurement, that will drive even better behavior. To me, in my world, as a US Senator, the problem is in the Congress. And the problem in the Congress is that nobody is telling Congress that this is important. The environmental groups do, sure. But from the industry side, nobody. The US Chamber of Commerce is probably my worst enemy at trying to get anything done. They won't say how much money they get from the fossil fuel industry. I suspect it's a lot. I suspect that's why they are designated one of the worst climate obstructors in America. National Association of Manufacturers, right there with them. And then you go to places like the Banking Association. You got banks warning that there's going to be a mortgage collapse and a property values collapse along our coasts, because if you can't insure your property, you can't get a mortgage on your property. And if you can't get a mortgage on your property, you can only sell to a cash buyer. And the chief economist of Freddie Mac has said, expect a crash. And yet the banks put zero effort into trying to help us do anything about climate. Ditto the insurers. Ditto the realtors. The problem that I have with the American corporate sector is not the American corporate sector directly, it's its trade associations. Its trade associations run between useless and terrible in this climate fight. So the most important thing that I would ask you to do is to check in with your folks and see how your trade associations are behaving on climate. And if you need to quote me, say that you heard a senator say that they were way more part of the problem than the solution. And it's really hard to drive things through Congress uphill against a relatively unified corporate political operation that is either disinterested in getting this done or opposed to getting this done. So trade associations, trade associations, trade associations, get them off their rear ends and onto the right side of this fight. And with that,
I asked an easy question last time I asked the first question. You mentioned Senator John McCain from his perspective. Senator John McCain, we need more senators like him and yourself in the United States Senate. situation with regards to holds on generals and admirals, flag officers.
Yeah. Yep, we actually have a recent president of the Naval War College who has an important post over at NATO, and we cannot get her there because of this array of holds that is taking place in the Senate. I'll be partisan about this because it's a partisan equation. If somebody on the Democratic side in our caucus was doing this, Chuck Schumer would find a way to make their life so miserable that they would relent. There are a million ways, formal and informal, in which leadership pressure can be brought to bear on a rogue senator. And that pressure is not being brought to bear on Senator Tuberville. He's being allowed to run around and block all of these promotions, and it's enough for some of them to say, oh, we disapprove of this, but there's no actual effort that is being made to deter him from doing it. And there are innumerable ways to do that. If push really, really came to shove, particularly if we could get bipartisan support, there is a parliamentary vehicle to solve the problem, which is that Leader Schumer goes before the Senate and he says to the presiding officer, the president of the Senate, I ask that all of the pending nominations be moved en bloc and go through the routine of what the steps are. You can write the language in half an hour. And then there's an objection. And the parliamentarian says that's not in order. We don't have such a rule. And then you challenge the ruling of the parliamentarian. And you can win that with a simple 50 votes, with a simple majority. That's the so-called nuclear option. That's how you change a rule. You assert it to be the rule, you're told that it isn't, and you overturn that vote. And now it is. So there's a way to do it, and I think we may end up having to do that, but that creates all sorts of other collateral dramas having to do with rules changes in the Senate. The easiest and best thing would be for the Republican Senate leadership to correct Senator Tuberville with sufficient force that he decided this was no longer a good thing to do, whether it's removing him from committees or whatever it is. Just it's their problem, and they need to solve it because it is an embarrassment. Thank you all very much. Welcome to Rhode Island. I hope you've had a wonderful time here, and I'm delighted that you come every year, and terrific work, SENEDIA, as always.
We have a commemorative coin.